Esther.
Ja, they're making up on that wee point there. Agnes then.
Hi Paul, good to see you. You're going to the airport tonight? No, tomorrow morning. I was going to say if you're going on the way tonight. Oh, it's very Give the world's largest step to the world's shortest person.
Okay, so hi everyone, welcome. Got quite a few new faces along tonight, I think, actually. So just to start off, it'd be great to have a show of hands. So who's been along before to one of our Startup Grind events? Yeah, a few returners. And for a few of you that are new, welcome. I'm Lisa Thompson, so I'm one of the directors for Scotland for Startup Grind. So we've actually been running now in Scotland for nearly 4 years, which is great. It's gone really quickly. But for those of you that don't know, Startup Grind is a global network for entrepreneurs. We're actually in over more than 115 countries now around the world. It was founded in San Francisco in 2010. And we connect more than 1 million entrepreneurs in over 115 countries and over 200 cities now. And actually, for November in 2017, we're having a challenge to have 200 events around the world in the same month, of which this is one. So really excited to have you all here. Just a couple of kind of housekeeping points is that we're very social. So please do take photos, join in the conversation on social media. It's at Startup Grind SEO. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to introduce tonight's guest. So. Sorry, did you have? Oh, sorry, I thought it was a question. I was like, that's early. But you have actually, you've prompted me on a good point, actually, so thank you for that. So we do actually call this a conversation. So what I will say is, if you have a question or you want to join in, you want to ask something, don't wait till the end. If you'd like to put up your hand and ask something, please do that, during the conversation. But anyway, as I said, I'm going to pass over and introduce Paul tonight. So absolutely delighted to welcome Paul Forrest. Paul is the founder of Consilium Analytics. I'm not going to steal all your thunder. I've just got a little intro. There's lots of things to tell. But Paul is founder of Consilium Analytics, Exulta Capital Partners, and also Drone Docs, amongst other ventures as well. He's worked with many FTSE 100 clients, major businesses, government entities. He's going to have so many stories and insights to share with us. It'll be fantastic. You're also a mentor with Virgin Startup. And sit on the board of a number of agile, disruptive and challenger businesses. So very, very excited to have Paul join us up from London tonight. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up to be here.
You're welcome.
And just to start off, but it'd be really good to hear from you, Paul. Can you just tell us a bit about, we're going to go into your journey and your career path.
In the RAF, my mother was a nursery nurse. And between the two of them, I suspect the extent to which they were entrepreneurial was quite limited to probably selling all of our second-hand clothes, bicycles and various other bits and pieces. So the answer is no. And I don't think I really became too exposed to people in that space because I largely grew up on military bases.
Okay. And then, tell us about your career progression yourself. So you went into the military yourself?
Yeah, it should be a no-brainer to people here that you grow up on a military base, you think, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll join the military, and why not? And the plan when I was looking at early career options was to study first and then join up with some sort of antedated seniority. They give you this wonderful thing. I'll tell you what, we'll throw loads of cash at you. You go away, you do 3 years doing a course somewhere, getting blind drunk every night and all of that wonderful stuff. And at the end of it, you'll come and you'll do your initial officer training, and then in another 3 years, you'll be, if you're lucky, you'll be flying cargo loads of plastic dog turds out of Hong Kong. Or alternatively, instead of going and doing all of that, you can do it tomorrow. So you say, okay, I'll do it tomorrow, good. And give up on the funding and everything else and just attest into the forces and off you go. And I, at that stage, considered myself to both want and looked forward to a career in the armed forces and nothing else. And running a business, being entrepreneurial, none of that factored into it. What it did give me was it gave me a truckload of very useful skills, some quite bizarre skills, some unusual skills. Most people don't realise, but when you're in the forces, it's actually against Queen's regulations to be in debt. Or be in debt to the level where it can't be managed. And you have a responsibility as an officer to take control of the financial affairs of some of the junior ranks. When I joined the forces, I earned £22 a day as a commissioned officer. Who spends more than 22 quid a day on coffee?
Yeah, some lifestyle challenges.
So it's not quite, it's actually after the Falklands War. But the issue of having a junior officer dealing with somebody at a young age who was quite a bit older than you and in financial difficulty when you were looking at your mess bill thinking, how in the world am I going to pay this? And again, what most people don't realise is as an officer, your junior officer, you actually have to buy all your own uniform. So when people do, when people do silly things like shoot at you and you get a hole in your combat trousers, you're not really thinking about the wound. You're actually thinking about, bloody hell, that's another 30 quid down the drain.
Okay. So that you learned financial planning early in that
prudence is what you learned, and you learn lots of little tricks. Like if you learned to play cards, you could get more kit that didn't cost anything. And if you were good at cards, you get a lot of kit. If you cheated at cards, you get even more.
Okay, so I'm seeing an approach to risk starting to be built in.
Yeah, well, the risk assessment that you would typically do was whether or not you could outrun this big guy from the Marines who was going to lose his trousers very shortly because you were going to beat him at cards or cheat him at cards.
So you did that for a period of time, and how did you find the transition, coming out from, I guess, a very, structured environment to coming out to next steps? How did you find that?
Yeah, it was difficult, and I was fortunate, if that's the right word. I didn't really have any skills. I could probably do a good job of killing a few people and stuff like that, but I could follow people, and I could write really good service writing. And those of you who've been in the armed forces, you'll know what that's like. But basically, I could write formal letters to people, and that was pretty much it. That was my skill set. And I knew the Queen's regulations inside out and backwards, which is really useful in Civvy Street. The transition was difficult.
And not making light of it, because it's difficult for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, and even now, I still have this. I've employed ex-service personnel, not because I feel sorry for them. There's no pity there. It's because I know they've got a skill set which a lot of people just can't even get close to. You can work 30 years in a large corporate organisation and not even shade these guys. The fact that they then have that further composure and mental attitude that sees them through some of the highest risk scenarios without flapping means that they're a good choice to hire. But actually what you really want is that hybrid of somebody with a bit of domain expertise or subject matter expertise mixed with that. And that's where, for me, I was rapidly boning up on and learning domain expertise. And I did a data science project back in the late 80s. We call it data science. Call it data science now, because that's trendy, isn't it, Michael? Yeah. data
So
science.
what was it called then?
Well, what I was doing things like troop deployment in places like Northern Ireland using data from a variety of different sources. So we had the Met Office data over here, we had shopping data coming from the City Council, then we had the troop deployment data, we had the police data. And it was really funny because, you know, what we generally found was the terrorists go home when it rains. So, you know, all these red splodges on the map that said we need to deploy someone there quickly could be mitigated by a cloud system coming in stage right. And we learned things like that, and that degree of, we had no predictive analytics. We were building systems that were as real time as they could be from these different data sources, and it answered unanswered questions. And I was
Were you
quite
having
lucky with that.
access to like cutting edge technology?
No, we
at
didn't.
that?
Believe it or not, we did it all on one of those cheap, shitty little, crappy little Amstrads. And I remember my boss coming in saying, "Come on, I need this data now." And I'm sat there with a tape in the tape deck, and all you can hear is this thing going as it's loading the program. And it took the best part of 10 minutes to load the program, and then would promptly crash. So no, we didn't have cutting edge technology. And just to put it into context, if you looked at the Air Force at the time, the Tornado air defence variant had just come into service, and it had a computer that you used a tape recorder to load the program to fly the aircraft every morning. And the pilot would walk out with a little cassette and put it in, audio cassette. Trust me, it's true. You'd look at this and you think, wow, okay, well, if you can fly that on that, I'm probably going to be okay on this. But it was very Heath Robinson, because we would buy the computer systems and write the stuff ourselves by buying books. I learnt to programming in COBOL and Coral 66 and Fortran by buying books.
So it was largely self-taught.
Oh, yeah. Well, you couldn't go on a course because nobody would pay for it. And I just got a lucky break in that eventually I was doing some work around specifying new versions of the same system. And a Big Four consultancy accounting firm came in. In those days it was a Big Six. Yes, I am that old. But it wasn't a Big Eight, so I'm not that old. Came in and they kicked the tires and I said, "Oh, we like what you've done here. Do you want to come and work for us?"
Okay. And that's how you made that transition to corporate.
Yeah. And then the first thing they said is, "By the way, we've got no need for your skills, so we want to train you up in other stuff." And so strategy and corporate finance and capital markets and IT strategy and outsourcing and PPP. Did loads of PPP and PFI.
And I'm going to ask what that kind of
Private
means.
finance initiatives. So these days, a lot of the schools in Scotland were built off the back of the PFI. Okay. I didn't do any of the schools, by the way, so you have to let me out of here alive tonight. I didn't do any of the schools, didn't do anything like that. I generally, because of my domain expertise, ended up doing military assets. Eurofighter, Typhoon, things like that, mission support. And all of that was the closest it got to what I used to do. But I suddenly acquired all of these new skills.
And this is a question that we definitely did talk about when we were prepping, was that just thinking about, you know, the skills that people learn working in large corporates or larger consultancy businesses. How do you think that can help them for preparing to maybe going into startup life or starting up on their own ventures?
Two schools of thought. The first is that it doesn't help at all. And in fact, what it does is it teaches you a rule set that you essentially carry with you for the rest of your life, that you use as a measure of what should I break by way of rules today. The other school of thought, and I actually ascribe to both of these, just to be clear. The other side of it is it teaches you discipline. It teaches you the responsibility to report to a stakeholder, which in a startup environment where you have shareholders, stakeholders, financial investors, it becomes incredibly important that you don't lose focus and have nothing other than a line of sight over your MVP or your route to market. And what you do instead is you embrace those people because they're your new best buddies, because they've got a bloody big checkbook and they like what you tell them. So actually understanding that stakeholder environment from the corporate world becomes an incredibly useful skill, as does some of the ancillary soft skills you learn in those environments. Because generally speaking, you can't go and you are editing this, aren't you? Good. You can't go.
It's a live stream.
You can't go and. I was going to say you can't go and bitch slap people, but whatever. whatever the polite version of that is, you literally can't go and, what's the more polite way of saying it, kick the crap out of people. You can't do that either, but you can't do any of this. And the challenge is, because you can't do that, you have to find coping mechanisms to find ways of delivering tough messages and hard messages back to people. And the real value is you learn this skill set and you don't know you're doing it. Yeah. You find everything starts to improve. Your relationships outside of work start to improve. People invite you to parties. People aren't too fussed when you get drunk and puke on their new rug.
Not that they tell you.
Well, inevitably. But the way it works is that you do have this new feature-rich skill set, which I swear you would probably struggle to get anywhere else. But you then also learn how to account for what you do. You learn to be able to forecast and build cash flow projections on the basis of reality, not on the basis of myth or hyperbole. So you're not sitting there saying, do you know what, I'm going to do a serious telephone numbers worth of sales here, when you know in reality, because you've never seen that before in that environment, the prospects of it happening are quite slim. Okay. So you moderate and you manage back into something which is altogether more realistic.
So you had a very varied career in consulting, and you've worked with some of the big names, different very large range of different industries as well. What do you think are the skills that can help you to navigate and add value in so many different sectors?
Yeah, I mean, the ability to move into different sectors. I mean, for those of you who've ever had any dealings with the Big Four, you'll know one of the biggest challenges is they like to stick you in a pigeonhole and say, right, okay, look, you can spell banking, so you're in the financial services team, or you know what a TV channel is, so you can be in technology, media, and entertainment. Yeah, good luck with that. I kind of went through that part of my career predating the requirement to have any real domain expertise. So they would say, we've got a project over here and no staff. So today, Matthew, you are going to be a TV expert, go and sell to this TV company, and then deliver the damn project. So you very quickly built up deep domain expertise. I mean, really deep domain expertise across the board.
You're learning it from the ground up.
Right. And you're having to stay more than 10 steps ahead of the client. So you're doing a lot of extra processing, mental processing, to understand complex business problems they've presented, where 9 times out of 10, they actually don't know what the problem is, so they can't frame it. And the discovery you have to do has to flush out that unmet need or the gap. And it's an exceptionally powerful skill to have. And it becomes more important from the entrepreneurial perspective when you start to be able to focus that back on your own business.
And what led you to move from consulting to go into, working and setting up your own ventures, and what was the impetus for that?
The list is long and distinguished, possibly starting with the frustration of working in a corporate environment, back to my rule set. The frustration of working for people who just don't get it because they've arrived at their position of seniority and responsibility. If you're watching, you know who you are. And please, I hope you're watching. Should have texted them before we started. I still occasionally drunk text senior partners.
Okay.
Just for fun.
So that was the first on the list.
But you get to a stage where you think, well, do I really want? Are these people I really want to work with? I got slightly tired of the faux friendship. Let's go down the pub and discuss your career.
It's true though. We spend so much of our time with the people that we work with.
Yeah, and frankly, these are people that I wouldn't choose to socialise with on a regular basis. I may even cross the road if I'd seen them fall over. I'd probably laugh first, but I'd then cross the road. And you look at that and say, well, what does that tell you about the community of people you're working with? You pick people you enjoy spending time with. And where I'm at now is I spend a lot of time picking and choosing quite carefully and working with businesses where I enjoy the company, the people I engage with, and building teams on the basis of finding people I would genuinely spend time with. So that was one of my first reasons for transitioning out. The second, which was perhaps the most important, possibly the most important. I'm sure you'll get it and you'll understand why it's most important. But I worked with a business. This was rock and roll, this business, a real rock and roll. I swear some of you will know the story because I'll have told some of you before. You won't know, but you probably already own it, but I'll tell you about it and it'll really upset you. So, hey-ho. I work with a company based out of Dresden in Germany, and these guys contacted me through my interest in film and the work I do in film, and said, look, you know, we know you've done a lot of 3D filming and stuff like that. So, you know, I filmed Lord of the Dance in 3D in Dublin, and they'd seen that I got this interest in 3D.
This is something that we should call out.
We'll
come
do
on
that
to
later.
that.
And they said, look, you know, we know you know 3D. We're looking for someone who knows 3D and can do capital raises and can do corporate finance, lead advisory. I said, okay, well, you know, tell me what you've got. And they said, we've developed fully holographic display systems. So when I stopped laughing, I said, no, you haven't. Yeah, I know 3D. I really do know 3D. I know 3D to the extent that I know how to explain it to physics professors around the world at the same time as explaining it to cinematographers and producers as well as bankers. Oh boy, how wrong I was. The world leaders in holography are Arizona University, and they've spent the best part of 40 years and blown wads of cash that you could only dream of. I'm talking multi-billions of pounds on this. Kinetic, the old Defence Research Laboratory in the UK, spent £8 billion trying to develop holographic display systems. Cisco, John Chambers, the global CEO of Cisco, and I know he's watching because he loves to watch these things, or not. He spent substantial amounts of cash and many years trying to develop these. The problem was the best they could get to was Arizona here and now, this point in time, could produce 2 postcard-size images every minute. Now, for those of you who know anything about film or television typically operates at 25 frames per second. Film, we operate at 24 frames per second. If you're in the States, it's slightly faster. Who knows why? 29.97 frames per second. But trying to then take those images and produce them that quickly becomes a real challenge. So my guys in Germany said, well, we knew you wouldn't believe it, so here's a flight ticket if you want to come and have a look at our prototype. Oh, really? Prototype? What do you mean you've got a prototype? You told me you were all scientists. Scientists don't make prototypes. Engineers make prototypes. He said, yeah, we've got a few hobbyists in the business. And I got over there, and they got a chest X-ray machine. The chest X-ray machine was a quarter high-definition panel. And they put this demo of Sonic the Hedgehog on there and various other things. And I'm a cinematographer, so I looked at this and said, I get this. Because I wasn't looking at an image at the display plane, i.e. the TV. I was looking at an image in front of me, and then 2 miles behind the display plane. And then they flew a biplane at me. And when it came to the display plane, I ducked, because there was only 2 meters left. It looked real. And the scientists don't call them images, they call them reconstructions, because they work the same way everything else does. You don't see the beer, or the tin. You don't see the beer, because I'm going to drink that. You see the tin, and what you're actually seeing is light reflecting off this, that basically this red here is a filter that filters out all other light except the red light, and it reflects, and you pick that up. Great. But if I know where your eyes are, and I can track your eyes, I can also serve a hologram to each eye on the basis of what you're seeing. And all of these guys in places like Arizona, or the Muppets as we came to know them quite affectionately, they were trying to boil the ocean. 250,000 times the processing power of modern computer technology, 250 times the resolution of a 4K TV set just to be able to do this. And that's not really affordable for the home, I'm guessing, even if you're a bit of a tech geek.
Yeah, it's not going to go to market.
No. So these guys had said, well, look, if we know where your eyes are and we can track with current webcam technology, we can stick one of these in each part of the bezel and we can track 10 pairs of eyes, 5 pairs of eyes, 100 times a second. So we know where your eyes are, we know what you're looking at, and we can serve you a hologram. But instead of serving you the whole image, we work on the basis of the way human physiology works. So if you look at that can, if you all look at that can is in focus to you, but nothing else is. The Japanese have a term for what sits out of focus. It's called bokeh. And that bokeh is that creamy background you get and the creamy foreground you get that differentiates foreground, subject, background. And the issue with that is you can't draw depth cues from foreground and background. You can't get depth. You get depth cues from this because you can see it and your eyes are pivoting towards it and focusing on it. So your brain tells you where this is in the scene, but you get nothing from what's behind me. You can't tell. It's a flat scene. So what we do is we serve a 2D scene and serve a hologram for the bit that you're looking at. As a result, we could do this on a quarter HD system, and we can deliver resolution far beyond 4K TVs with a $25 chip in the back of the TV and turning one of the LC gratings through 90 degrees. Funky. End of year one valuation was predicted to be £14.1 billion on the basis of a license fee from each of the big manufacturers, 4% cost price of each display panel. It's a $100 billion a year marketplace.
And did they know that valuation when they were talking to you?
Well, we
What
came to that
stage was
valuation.
it?
But what we
So
did
you
was we hugely discounted the valuation. We said between you, me, and the Post, and anyone who is actually watching, we said, the business is probably, you have to personally discount it. I say this to entrepreneurs all the time. Your business really isn't worth a telephone number because it's fraught with risk and challenges, but it probably is worth something quite substantial. So find some middle ground in there. Personally discount on the basis of what the offer needs to be to gain the cash to get to the next steps. We signed up Sharp, Samsung and LG. That accounts for 55% of that $100 billion a year marketplace. They are the dominant forces. Who's got a Sony TV? Suckers. Sony haven't made a TV for years. It's made by Samsung in Korea. It just so happens it's given a different colour gamut to reflect what Sony think are the correct colour schemes. In reality, the colour scheme is actually the correct colour scheme with any television, and anyone from cinema, theatre, film will tell you this, is actually a standard, and you can Google it, called Rec 709. And we make films and we grade them to broadcast safe to Rec 709. And your TV should be calibrated to that, not what Sony thinks looks good or not what Samsung thinks good. But Sony don't make TVs.
So it was that opportunity and the chance to get involved in that commercialisation.
It's a chance to get involved in it and to potentially get involved beyond the firm's involvement. And when the firm said, no, you can't, I said, all right, see ya, wouldn't want to be here. I quit.
Yeah.
And I think I was on a 1 year notice, and I managed to be sufficiently disruptive that they just said, well, why don't you just fuck off?
Yeah. And that was your leap into this next phase.
Something like that. Yeah. I had a few business ventures running along the way. I mean, I had my first venture was actually while I was at school. I used to buy floppy disks. You remember floppy disks?
No.
So I used to buy thank you. I used to buy 5.25-inch floppy disks. I bet you don't remember them. Because they were very expensive, I would basically sell the promise of these disks at £3 each and buy a box of 10 at 20 quid and make a tenner on a box because people couldn't afford a whole box. So I'd then just sell them 1 or 2 discs. But I'd only order them after I had the cash in my back pocket.
Yeah, so you were entrepreneurial.
Yeah, well, within 9 months, I was shipping 35,000 discs a month. And I set up a small software company called Rebus Consulting, and we developed a piece of computer software there. I say we, it was myself and a friend who were bedroom coders. And we wrote it for the BBC Micro, which was called BBC Communicator. Communicate. But all of this was sort of coming back to the same place. My realization that penny had dropped. Do you know what? I actually don't really want to have that person as a boss. I don't mind having that person as a client because I can talk to the client on the same level. But a boss, I've got to pretend I like this guy. And I don't.
And so one of the well, actually, I'm going to pick up on one theme first. So you touched on it there. So when I spoke to Paul and we were doing a little bit of prep for this session, I found out that you have a whole other career alongside, in addition to everything that we've got on the bio that I sent out. You're also a cinematographer and videography and working in film.
I don't do videography. I don't.
Sorry, I got the term wrong.
Yeah, I do film. I'm a Steadicam operator. As a camera operator, I operate one of those rigs you see at football matches and stuff like that. But I don't do it on TV. I operate these huge rigs. So 3D, for example, I'd shoot 3D with 2 cameras on my Steadicam rig, typically rocking up at or around the probably the 35 kilo, 40 kilo mark, something like that. And it's bolted to your chest, and you run around sweating a lot, and you wear headphones where someone shouts and swears at you a lot.
And this is not a hobby. This is
I do it professionally.
Professional.
I'm a member of the Society of Operating Camera Operators from the US. It's one of the technical guilds, which is feeder for the Academy awards. This time of the year is my favourite time of the year because FedEx turn up every 3 days with another bag of DVDs for my consideration. So I get all of the films that haven't yet come out. I sit and watch them, and you know.
And what does that give you in terms of like juggling these different kind of career lives? Is it the creativity aspect?
Yeah, it gives me a good left brain, right brain outlet, but it also offers me the opportunity to bring one to the other and vice versa. So when I stepped into producing, and I'm fortunate enough now to be a multi-award-winning producer, multi-award-winning cinematographer, and a multi-award-winning screenwriter, because I've dabbled with all of them, because I get frustrated at the lack of progress with certain people in those industries. So I come to the conclusion that doing it myself is probably quicker.
Which is probably an entrepreneurial trait.
It is. It totally is. It's that classic thing of, you know, you guys, you'll all, it needs must. You'll all just roll your sleeves up and get on with it. And it's the same attitude. And you're sitting there having seduced half a dozen tax-based investors to part with 25 grand each, and they're going to stick it into an SEIS scheme, and you want to make a film or a documentary, and you haven't got a script. You're thinking, crap. So that story I told you is going to be slightly different now that I'm writing it. And then you get on and do it, and you know, I make films using a clever filmmaking model. I won't commit numbers to camera because I have to protect some of the investors involved in this, but have, with certain projects delivered to EIS and SEIS investors, circa between 600 and 1,000% return on investment through dividends alone. So that's without even giving them the cash back at the end of the 3 years. But that's because we have this clever filmmaking model. I'll make a film for 127, 125 grand. You can't tell you. And I paid everyone going rate wages on that. We shot it in 14 days and a live orchestra with 70 odd players in Budapest, Maybank Holiday 2015 on that one. And it won 51 awards globally, and it was selected for 89 festivals globally, including festivals up here in Glasgow. And we make a lot of money by selling those because, frankly, when you go to the cinema, you don't pick your films on the basis of whether it's a big film, big budget, little budget. You'll pick your films traditionally on the basis of either already knowing a little bit about the story, word of mouth, or by what we call the one sheet, the poster when you go into the cinema, if you're going in blind. So we had a bloody good one sheet, and we had a lot of word of mouth, and we had festivals to drive that word of mouth. Yeah. Clever filmmaking.
And so we've got a question there, yeah.
Question this time, not just a wave. So obviously you're involved in a number of different industries, Paul. Are there key traits that make somebody successful as an entrepreneur then, or?
It's for one of my questions.
I read them in advance. Or does it depend on the industry? Can a number of different types of personality, types of person be successful?
Yeah, I mean, my general view is that everybody has it as a tenet that sits within them. Everybody has that capability. It's largely untapped with many people because of their risk profile or their attitude toward risk. And for those who are either forced into it or for those who choose to embrace it, they're actually unlocking that attitude towards risk. It's a hugely risky environment. It's a risky process. You know, making a film with 120 odd grand of someone else's money brings with it big risks. Notwithstanding the fact that, you know, if you take money from the wrong type of people, the Yardies pension scheme.
Gambling. Do you need to go all in, Paul? Are there smart risks you can take? Should you not take any risks? Is it all based on sort of factual evidence, or to be successful, do you need to make the big leap?
I think this is where you do start to get nuances driven by your makeup, your attitude, your own beliefs and tenets. I'm not for those of you who know me, I'm not a gut-based person. I'm not one of these people who go, I think we should do this because my gut says it, because my gut's going to be wrong. Every day of the week, every minute of the day. I'm a fact and logic person, so I go away and I do the deep dive research.
I like the data.
I love data, so I come back and I say, well, the data says this, so I'm going to go out now and I'm actually going to test and qualify that data. It's almost a quasi-academic approach in the sense that you're actually trying to understand what sits behind the data and work out whether that exposes levers or leverage to be able to get a more appropriately balanced degree of risk to remove some of that risk and to make it something which is more likely to fall in your favour as a gamble.
And that kind of leads on to another question that I had was, I mean, I guess, how many business plans do you, or, you know, how many propositions or pitches would you see in a typical month, say?
You've seen me. I rarely get propositioned. I get a lot of business plans, but you know the business plans generally that come across my desk are interesting. Some of them have very, very credible. They fall into categories. Some of them have very credible product offerings, but they lose credibility with the forecast or the implementation effort, the risk, the partnerships they need to make it happen, or worse, the competitive challenges they have from people who have got bloody deep pockets. Who remembers Stack Electronics? You should. Any lawyers in the room? One. Thank you.
You're going to admit.
Stack Electronics. You an IP lawyer? You? No. Okay. Stack Electronics developed a wonderful piece of software. For those of you my age, you'll remember this. Hard drives used to cost a truckload of cash back in the 80s, 90s. And you'd buy a 20 meg hard drive and it would run out very quickly. So Stack Electronics, a company based in the UK, came up with a piece of software that did on-the-fly compression, decompression, that doubled the size of your hard drive. It was invented by Stack Electronics. The product was called Stacker. Stacker came about at about the same time that we were transitioning from Windows 3.1 to Windows 95. Who remembers that? Yeah. Failure is not an option. It comes as standard with Windows. Sorry, I stole a joke from someone that told me that earlier, but it got a bigger laugh when they did it. But this transition to from 3.1 to 95 brought with it multitasking, the capability to do background tasks on the fly. And Microsoft said, you know, we like the idea of that software. And so they went ahead and did a deal with Stack to purchase licenses to go into Windows 95. And if you remember, Windows 95 had that capability built into it. At a software level, it would double the size of your hard drive, using technologies we now know, which are all that compression, decompression. But it did it on the fly. It was very effective. But of course, the challenge was you had this tiny company that had written this code and this huge company that was exploiting it. And the huge company had made big promises. And the huge company said, you know what, yeah, we'd love to pay you, but we're not going to. So sue us. So how long do you think you could keep Microsoft in court?
No.
Right, you can't. It's not the only story. If any of you want to see a good film this weekend, go and rent, buy, steal a copy of, I didn't say steal, rent a copy of Flash of Genius. Flash of Genius is a brilliant film, which is the true story of the chap who invented the intermittent wash wipe. And he took it to Ford and he said, what do you think? He said, bloody hell, this is good. Like this. He said, I've always wanted a factory, so give me 3 months and I'll build a factory. And something like 6 months later, he built his factory. And he was walking back to Ford to say, I'm ready, I'm tooled up, good to go. And he went back to Ford, and as he did, there was a Mustang driving out of the Ford factory in the rain in Detroit with its wipers going, shh, 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 shh. They said, oh yeah, but you told us it would be 3 months. You took 6. So we decided to do it ourselves. So sue us. He spent 10 years with his marriage falling apart, losing his family, putting himself through law school in the evenings, reading every single piece of case law available to him to prosecute that case in court. And even when the payout happened all that time later, he got a fraction of what he would have got if he'd had a licensing agreement that had actually paid him out as he went. Every car company in the world uses that technology. He's got nothing because he had no idea how to go about doing it properly, doing it sensibly, and finding that pitch that takes the risk out of working with these big guys who intentionally or otherwise will seek to exploit what you have between your ears for their benefit at your cost.
So what's the advice from that then, in terms of...
Yeah, it's to find people who can help you navigate that path. And this is the interesting thing about Virgin Startup. People are there who have been through this, who know the way the law works, who know how to go about protecting this. Doesn't matter if you've got a patent. Who's got a patent here? It's expensive, isn't it? Yeah. Why bother? frankly, it's actually almost better to keep things at patent pending, because all the time it's at patent pending, you can vary the art, which means that you can actually challenge people getting close to you. As a word of advice, the holographic technology I talked about earlier had 130 patent families, 650 global patents. First best, second best, third best, so the competition couldn't get anywhere near it. And by doing that, you hold yourself harmless from the risk of people trying to replicate or re-engineer or reverse engineer what you've done.
So is that developing an IP strategy?
Right. Getting that advice comes typically from people who have done it, sleeves rolled up, who understand how to go about it on a low-cost basis, how to do it where you don't get fleeced by someone who is setting themselves up to provide that IP advice. I still see it now. You know, you can file your own patent. It doesn't cost a lot to file your own patent. Or you can go to an agency and they'll charge you 300 times more than the actual cost. Good luck with that.
As a patent attorney, I would question some of the strategic advice you're giving.
Well, is that a question or a statement?
No, I just don't want to take an hour.
Well, look, yeah, my view is that patent attorneys, engineers, are typically very effective. The problem is that very few people end up with those, and they end up with trolling agents and intermediaries who think they know a little bit about patent law. I know patent law. And I can tell you now that the problem I meet with on a regular basis is that people presented by a lot of these entrepreneurs as their patent expert are not patent lawyers, patent attorneys. They're not engineers. They're not people that understand how it works. They're people who can practice in doing that, because you don't need to be qualified to help them set up a patent.
You should use a chartered patent attorney.
You should,
yeah,
and that's
to get
the
the
advice.
right advice.
And that's the advice. But the problem is you only know that typically as a result of somebody getting it wrong and coming to you and saying, it all went horribly wrong the last time I did it, what's your advice? And you say, you should use a chartered patent attorney.
Well, now everyone knows.
Yeah, so that's good advice. Thank you. Okay, so in terms of, we talked a bit about the personal qualities of an entrepreneur and what can make them successful. What about founding teams? Would you, what
Finding teams, yeah.
Founding teams.
Founding
in terms
teams.
of like, what would be your advice for somebody that's maybe on that startup journey and started to think about building out that team around
Put
them?
more effort into it than you do your marriage.
Yeah.
It's likely to be a messier divorce when you part company with your founding partner. I mean that quite seriously. I think the thing is that people make an assumption that your motivation and the outcomes you aspire towards are actually aligned, and in reality, for many of those, they're not aligned, and interests could be very different. Somebody can get into a startup venture on the basis they think it's essentially going to be a lifestyle offering that's going to deliver an income stream to them without the burden of having to work for someone else. Whereas their business partner might think, well, actually, this is wealth creation, and I want 10 times money in as money out, and I want that rapidly over that period.
Yep.
I've sold businesses for serious 8-figure numbers over the years, and it's largely been a mix of people in those environments exiting who fall into one of those two categories. And the trigger that's brought them to the start line there isn't about personal wealth creation, it's because they've fallen out, and that's a challenge.
So know the people that you're getting into business
Know
with.
them and spend a bit of time, a bit like couples counselling, as they say in the States. Spend a bit of time having someone actually facilitate that discussion, even if it's a mate down the pub. Get someone to actually ask you probing questions to make sure you're on the same page. Because if you're not on the same page, if I think it's all about market share and someone else thinks it's all about profitability, that lack of alignment is going to put you into a challenging situation where you'll very quickly start doing the wrong things that will upset each other and start to create dissent between the two of you that eventually will lead to that divorce. So flushing that out into the open, having transparency about motivation for both parties becomes quite key.
And going back to my question earlier about, you obviously see a lot of business plans, you see a lot of startup businesses and ideas. What are the types of ideas and propositions that get you excited and think, this has got potential, this has got weight behind it?
I do a lot of IP plays. I like IP. I like IP that is typically in the areas I regard as disruptive innovations, so AI, VR, AR, and machine learning. A little bit about robotic process automation, data. I like those types of things. I've seen what this stuff can do, and I've seen ways in which this can offer revolutionary solutions in different verticals, and therefore it has an extensive potential client base, and that addressable and accessible market is huge in most countries. So it gives rise to better prospects of getting something away sooner as a proof of concept, and then attracting investment, and then starting to sweat that investment for the benefit of some sort of scale program.
And talking about disruption, what would you say are the sectors that we're going to see, you know, in terms of disruption? Where's that coming? What's next?
Yeah, okay, so let's pick one that I'm working with at the moment, and I love the business, and you know, the owner's a great guy. Who's crowdfunded anything? Anyone? No one's crowdfunded. Okay, it's great fun, isn't it? It's different, and actually it doesn't have the same pressures of working with institutional or other investors, but it brings with it different challenges at the same time, and you sometimes feel like you're servicing a huge community of people who frankly don't really care. Is that a fair? No. Yeah. Now, you know, I like that, but I also like creative industries, and I think the problem is most creative industries practitioners struggle to really be truly business and investment focused. So if you're looking at equity crowdfunding, how they position the prospects of this being something that will genuinely deliver is quite difficult. If it's rewards based, how you can give someone the confidence that actually you're going to deliver the bag you've just designed, the t-shirt or whatever it is you want, becomes difficult. So I work with a business called Fundy. Fundy's a creative arts crowdfunding platform. The piece of disruptive technology, the two pieces of technology we've got in there that are hugely disruptive are funky things. Funky things. Okay, that's F-U-N-K-Y, not fucky things. So I couldn't say that on camera.
No.
But these funky things, at the front end, it's about building a massively open e-learning platform that enables and empowers creatives to learn entrepreneurial skills, business skills, and skills that will equip them with decision-making capabilities that generally you'll only see in someone who's been at it for about 5-10 years and making money. But it's designed to be community driven so that successful crowdfunders come back and become participants in that, giving their gift of knowledge and I sit at your feet and chronicle your wisdom, and then share that. And that part of that MOOC environment, the massively open online course environment, challenges the traditional education model.
Okay.
That's disruptive. But it also goes up against some very big established players trying to do something similar, but they can't introduce you then to a method by which you can fund your creative venture. On the other side of that, we have who knows blockchain? Good. So we have a blockchain platform. We have the first proof of concept that's up and running that works based on a proof of concept I built, I hand-coded, that allows us to build transparency into the exploitation of creative IP and assets. Because the big problem is, if you make a film, how many people know the film system with any degree of intimacy? So who knows Warner Brothers? Sony? Universal? Good. They're the major studios. That's what we call the major studios. They have one thing, all of them have one thing in common. They make films, they distribute films, and they have theatres where you'll go and see a film. We don't call them cinemas, we call them theatres. They own those. That's the route to market for a filmmaker. If you're an independent filmmaker and you make a film, you sell distribution rights in different territories to one of those players or more. And what will happen is they'll exploit it in airline videos or DVDs or VOD through Netflix, Amazon, Sky Q. And in each environment, they'll try to make the most from it. It's in their interest to do that. And the deal that is typically done, as by way of an illustrative example, is, I'll tell you what, it's going to cost us £10,000 to promote your film. So we'll give you half of what we think we're going to make. We think we're going to make 30,000. So we'll give you 15,000. Then until we've got our money out, we won't give you anything else. So we'll get the other 15. And then after that, we'll split it 50-50. But bizarrely, that's after all of their expenses have come out. Who thinks you ever get all of their expenses out? Right. Now, when it gets to theatre releases, distribution in the cinema, the challenge is I've got to dispute that I thought 100 people walked into the Odeon in Glasgow, where the Odeon is saying, no, only 10 people came in. Where someone may choose, if they were that minded, to take 100 sets of box office fees, but only give me half of 10 box office fees. The blockchain puts transparency back into that process for many of those distribution channels, and we call them windows in the film industry. And it means then that that transparency creates an immutable record of exploitation of the IP. And by doing that, I can start to give back an honest income stream to the creative artists behind the venture. And we've built these two disruptive pieces. Of course, it won't surprise you to know that when we built the first blockchain POC on this, private blockchain, for those of you that know blockchain, private blockchain, we were approached by two of the major studios, both of whom wanted to buy it for a very large sum of cash. Not because they wanted to use it, they wanted to shelve it. Yeah? The words shit and scared rearranged into a popular expression were where they were coming from. And they were really worried about it.
And to me, that goes back to what were your motivations in terms of developing it. It sounds like, you know, taking the cash wasn't.
It's the pain of working with a lot of producers over the years who have great film projects, great scripts, exceptionally well put together products that create a piece of unique intellectual property that is often better than the major studios can ever deliver. So I can deliver a film that wins all the awards it wins for 120 odd grand. And Michael Bay can make a film for 289 million that requires a further 200 million in prints and advertising just to make sure everybody goes and sees it on the opening weekend, because it's not good enough to create word of mouth. And he's going to beat me every day of the week.
Question there.
Tomatoes, they're sort of disrupting that industry where now everyone just goes on Rotten Tomatoes, sees, oh, that's fresh, that's not, and decides if they want to see it or not.
The problem is the freshometer on Rotten Tomatoes, it's driven by critics, and it's driven by people who are on the inside of the Hollywood industry. You may or may not have noticed over the last few weeks that the Hollywood industry has been called into question. And it's not just in terms of the things you've seen. The most open secrets that we know of are the hugely manipulative environment that sits around it, the thousands of fake reviews. Allegedly, I have to put that word in there, so if I can borrow a legal word, allegedly, Batman versus Superman had the largest quantum of 10-star reviews on IMDb of virtually any film released in the last 10 years. Who saw it? Enjoy it? On a scale of absolute shit to shit, where did it fall? Right. So, you know, the thing is you can influence this. Bizarrely, British independent low-budget films suffer the worst trolling. This is an IMDb fact. IMDb is a British company. Yeah, that's right. But the issue with reviews is they are hugely influential to the extent that British independent films suffer from people posting reviews saying it's crap before they've even seen it. You know, the last film we did, we were getting reviews from the Ukraine, and we haven't even done a distribution deal in Ukraine. It's not even traveling to Ukrainian illegal download sites because we built a platform, built a really neat platform. Who's a techie? Who's a real geek?
We must have some.
Oh, come on. One? That's statistically not correct. Data scientist. We built this wonderful piece of technology. What they do to get around the signature is they crop the black bars off the film, because you can't see them anyway. Then they crop 10 pixels off either side, and it creates a new unique signature. So we can't sample that. So I thought, yeah, bugger that. I'm going to write an algorithm that samples the 15 square pixels smack bang in the middle. Because I've never seen an illegal download where they've cropped something out of the middle. So I can now find my copy. So I know exactly where they are. Yeah, you know, I've got a reputation as a bastard to maintain, so I have to work hard at that, clearly.
Well,
but that is where you get to them with these reviews. They're not necessarily helpful, but we in the industry know that they're not really authentic. So we rely more on word of mouth, and we use the festival circuit to drive prints and advertising and get the film into cinemas, where people get to see it typically at a festival for low cost. £15 pass and I can go see 10 films. And then they'll come out and tell their mates will buy it on DVD. You know, the last film we did, we shipped 250,000 units in the first 8 weeks on DVD physical copy. You know, at a time when people allegedly don't buy DVDs. Go figure. But that's word of mouth, old school.
And so we've talked, you know, about the kind of the number of ventures and the different types of things that you're involved in. And obviously there's been a number of, you know, really, really exciting successes. But what's your approach to, you know, because, you know, some things are not going to go to plan. You know, failure is part and parcel of entrepreneurship. What's your approach to that? Is it about learning from failure?
Yeah, I mean, inevitably, the grounding and the groundwork for virtually everything I do as a new MO or new way of working going forward is driven by previous failures or instances that haven't delivered what I expected the outcome to be. I operate a fail-fast model. I don't hang around. If the indicators indicate that it's not going the way it should, I go back, I examine it, I analyse it, I do a course correction, and I move quickly.
Is there anything you can share with us?
A piece of tech a few years ago, which I thought was quite useful, that would go into mobile phones, and it was for identity management. And the problem was if anyone in here knows identity management, it was just too ahead of its time. How many people here 5-10 years ago were really worried about identity management and their private data getting out there on the internet? Yeah, we weren't, were we really? 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we were trying to sell cyber security to the banks. And they'd sit there and say, yeah, nobody's ever going to be able to hack our systems. How the hell are they going to hack our systems? You know.
So it's been too early ahead
It's
of the curve.
too early, but the problem with being too early is you can't afford to sit on something because the currency of knowledge of application of technology utilised and exploited needs to keep pace with what's happening in the industry. And the only way you can do that is to chuck cash at it. So shelved it, moved on.
So I've got another question I want to ask, and then I'm going to open up to the floor for other questions. But this is a question that we always ask all of our guests. Can you tell us what would be your top 3 pieces of advice, Paul, for entrepreneurs thinking about starting out?
You warned me about this and I've forgotten what my answer was. I don't know, it probably varies on a regular basis. I genuinely think it does vary because I think I'm influenced by what I see and what I see as success in others. I'm the world's worst person for actually looking at something and thinking, I like that bit, but I don't like that bit, so I'm going to have that bit. And I'm going to take that approach, that process away, and I'm going to factor it into the way I'm doing this. So I would always urge people to just cast the net slightly wider. Blockchain's a good example because there's a lot of blockchain ventures out there. The problem is a lot of people are hell-bent on delivering just another fintech solution. And blockchain isn't necessarily about fintech. Non-financial use cases are where the future and the revolutionary future of blockchain are. So if you have a look at what they're doing in the healthcare sector, I can borrow that for the film sector. If you have a look at what I'm doing in the film sector, I can borrow that for the drone regulation sector, whereby I can start to put in place mechanisms by which I can put transparency into drone ownership, drone usage and exploitation, and start to reduce the risks of people flying drugs, weapons and the like into prisons, and also using them for terrorist atrocities.
So do you see scanning other industries and other sectors?
I'm not sure it's even scanning other industries. I think, you know, the problem is I find with a lot of entrepreneurs, I guess you network a lot. Yeah? Yeah. Do you think you network enough? No. And therein lies the issue. I get this balance of, I've only got 5 days a week and 24 hours in each of those, and then I get 2 days where I have to pretend I'm a family man. Don't tell my kids. I hope they're not watching. But you know, you struggle to make quality time to go and network. There are people in this room who I see regularly at events, and I think, wow, these guys could teach me a lot of things, a thing or two, because their model of networking is to get in there and not waste time and just ask pertinent, sensible, probing questions. And I think having an armory of those types of questions, not by rote, but genuinely by interest.
And actually being interested in the answers.
and taking note of it and not dismissing it outright, but actually scoring it. If you take the Forces human intelligence model, you score your intelligence assets. That's a 5 out of 10. It's okay. That's an 8 out of 10. I'm going to look at that. That's a 1 out of 10. That could go in file 13. And taking that approach where you then say, I can factor that in. I've got to dispose of that. That's not for now, but it might be for soon. Because it also means you start to build a useful resource-based network, because you've got a blockchain venture. In 3 weeks' time, when I'm running out of resource to scale a venture I'm working on, I'm going to ring you up and say, how are you going about it? How are you finding your people? And you might tell me something useful, you might not. You might tell me you're also struggling. Then we might combine forces and go and see Michael at the back who can recruit blockchain people. And we might pitch together so we half the cost and recruit a truckload of people through him and share the upside of that because we've networked. Yeah?
So network.
Yeah, and I don't mean faux networking. You know, if any of you went to stuff like I'm not going to name it actually, but events where you meet investors and events where you meet advisors and stuff like that, and you're all wearing colour-coded dots to indicate what you are. And if you're like me, I used to peel them off, change the colour. It's great. It's always good fun doing that. So what's your business idea? Haven't got one. If you go to those events will not yield the benefit you're looking for. You need to get to events where someone creates a space like this, where you can stand and have an honest, earthy conversation, where you can bare your soul and tell people what's on your mind and say, well, what would you do?
And it can be lonely, starting up a business
It
as
can be
well.
incredibly lonely, but you know, again, surround yourself with coping mechanisms that allow you to gain access to people who will talk to you. Don't bother talking to the bank. Don't bother talking to, generally speaking, don't bother talking to professional advisors en masse, but find someone who you have a trusted relationship with and have conversations with them. And if they can introduce you to other people where they extend their degree of trust, have conversations with the person they introduce you to, IP lawyers, accountants, all of these guys. If you're introduced by someone who trusts you, that's going to give you a much better prospect of delivering a great piece of advice. Yeah? Yeah. And the problem is all too often you see entrepreneurs just picking up the phone and speaking to, oh yeah, you know, I've got this great idea and it's got big telephone numbers, so I must call. Today, Matthew, I'm going to call KPMG. Tomorrow, PwC. Deloitte the day after, because they must love what I've got. It's not the answer. The answer is to find trusted people you can work with and whom will tell you the truth. They won't fan your ego. They won't tell you, oh, wow, this is bloody awesome, when in fact it's not, but it might represent a fee to them. You want that honesty, integrity, and authenticity in that advice. That takes a bit of time to build that particular network.
So I'm going to open up now. I'm going to let other people ask any questions. Does anyone want to ask Paul a question? One at the front.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you also code yourself apart from being an entrepreneur as well, and I find that interesting because you're combining testing things out for yourself with running a company or something. So how do you approach testing out your ideas when you also have to manage so many other things at the same time? Because as a coder, I know that it takes some time just even to gain the knowledge to start coding the thing. So how do you approach?
I have several advantages in that I don't sleep much. And
I was actually going to ask you, when do you sleep?
Well, you see, I have a thing called LLI, which basically means I don't sleep a lot at all, but I also don't filter. I just get it all hitting me at the same time. But that prevents you from wanting to sleep as much as you might want to. And I know, quite genuinely, I'll code out of hours at night, and I'll test it, and then I'll pass it to someone else on a code exchange. I use GitHub extensively. I love GitHub. I want the sticker, but they've never made one. Or the T-shirt, maybe. Yeah, man, I'm so jealous. I mean, seriously, GitHub is awesome. And I believe in open source code, so I share what isn't commercially sensitive. I genuinely share what isn't commercially sensitive. I write a lot of IoT and smart home-based tech. I write a lot of AI-based tech, and I write a lot of blockchain I love. And it's not because it's going to change the world the way a lot of people think it is. It's because it's going to challenge the world in a way in which it forces people to change their attitudes. And that's a much better outcome. I find time by partitioning my time, looking at a 24-hour day and saying, okay, that's 2 or 3 hours here, that's 2 or 3 hours here. What I don't do is look at it and go, that's 7 hours I'm working on this. There's never one day where I'm spending the whole day doing all of that, because the danger for me is that would kill me. Coding, necessity is the mother of invention. When I started doing blockchain, I struggled to find anyone else who did blockchain. I reckon, we did a survey, MBM, we did a survey, a blockchain survey for ScotChain 17. And we did the survey and found that there's probably about 250, 300,000 people in the marketplace holding themselves out as blockchain devs. In reality, there's probably closer to 2,000 to 5,000. The rest are resprayed Java coders, the rest are resprayed C# coders. They're people who have learnt a little bit, but it's like first aid. A little bit of first aid is quite damning. You'll kill more people with a little bit of first aid. And I think that's true of blockchain. I think the problem is that these guys will do the name blockchain a disservice. And actually, it's got some pretty funky use cases. And people who are prepared to invest time and effort and learn the way there and come up with a real unmet business need, they will be the next genre of entrepreneurs who make it big.
Have we got another question? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Paul. Blockchain ICOs. There's been a lot in the media lately. China's banned them.
Yes.
So it says it's banned what they think are the illegitimate ones. They'll still allow some through. In the last week, there's been American lawyers saying, yeah, we're going to jump on this gravy train. The only thing that's stopping us is the gathering in of the money from people abroad, so we're going to go for Americans. Yeah. And then you've got governments saying the same. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think ICOs are, you see, people think ICOs are new, but actually we've had unregulated collective investment schemes for years. Therein lies the issue. The clue is in the title, it's unregulated. And if you want to attract a mass market to get involved in an ICO, for those of you who don't know an ICO is like an IPO, but it's done with a cryptocurrency to raise cash for a venture. They're unregulated. You put your money in, you buy your cryptocurrency, your pseudo shares. Can I call them pseudo shares? Yeah, it's essentially what they are. You've got them, and then the business goes under and tanks, and you've lost your cash. What do? Who do you go to? As a retail investor, you've made that decision. You've actually almost declared that you're a self-certified, sophisticated investor, even though you might not have the income to declare yourself as such. So you lose your money. So I think there is an issue in there around that regulatory environment. But I understand the ethos behind an ICO, and I understand the ethos of the people-powered element of that. I get that. So I think there needs to be some middle ground in there, and I think there needs to be some integrity through maybe exchanges that are built to allow ICOs to take place, where there's a degree of light touch regulation. And I like the notion of things a bit like the AIM market used to be, you know, the idea of light touch regulation, light touch compliance, but we'll create a vehicle in which you can trade and do this, where we've at least tested there's a real person here, not a group of Ukrainian 15-year-olds sitting in a bedroom hacking an ICO out and taking your cash. Does that give you my answer? How far apart from that is yours there?
An additional take on it. All of these threats are based on ICOs maybe being securities. And just to widen it, there's financial instruments, which are things you can trade. Securities are essentially promises that you're going to do something.
Yeah.
And yet, we have banknotes as well. In some countries, they say banknotes are securities because they've got promise to pay the bearer.
Yeah, it's a financial instrument.
And in others, they haven't.
Yeah.
So they haven't even got banknotes right. And yet we've got this worry about ICOs.
But that's where I think the exchanges create parity, or at least a pari passu environment where there is a degree of equal process, equal acceptance. My worry, if you like, is that a lot of these ICOs are without real foundation, and a lot of these ICOs tempt people on the basis of, you know, who bought. I mean, I've got Bitcoin, but Bitcoin looked like a cheap punt at the time when I took it. You know, it was dirt cheap, and now it's currently worth, I need Darryl in the room, it's currently worth about, about that, yeah. So, you know, on paper, I'm probably a Bitcoin millionaire, close on multi-millionaire. But the point with all of that is I don't know how liquid that is, because I can't sensibly trade it in its current form. I might be able to spend it, buy stuff with it, and I might be able to trade it across to another ICO at some stage. But the point with all of that is all I'm doing is moving paper money to paper money to paper money. And in reality, I may never get anything back for any of that. So you have to treat it like virtually any other gamble, in that you're prepared to walk away from it. I think it's a worry, and it will only get right when people genuinely start to build into it the same mechanisms we've seen in other securities trading around the world. Interestingly, the courts in the UK, where it hasn't yet been tested, but the advice that is being given through the civil procedures is that if tested, this is likely to fall under the Financial Services and Markets Act 2000. It's likely to be treated as a financial instrument without actually declaring what type of financial instrument it is. And if, therefore, you mislead investors, that's a criminal offence. So with your ICO, you may end up behind bars because you've perpetrated a criminal offence. So there may be a pressing need to build something to allow the honest brokers in this environment to purport their trade without fear of ending up behind bars. But in reality, the same's happened with unregulated collective investment schemes.
Do we have time for a last question? Is there any last question in the room?
Last question, Paul. People are going to look up your movie that you talked about earlier when they're going onto their Netflix later on. Do you want to give them a title, or should we keep it secret for...
No, keep it secret. We sold more than enough of that. I went through a phase where every presentation I did, I'd normally just cheat it and turn up, and I'd do one on data science or machine learning or something, and for the first 10 minutes I'd force you to watch the film. Once you're in, you're in. Say again?
We've missed out.
Yeah, well, you know, you didn't tell me you had a projector. The films to watch out for, so the one that will be made, we're making the Victors in H1 next year. Films, for those of you who know, they take quite a while to make. They do take a while to make and finish. We shoot them in about 15, 16 days on our model, and then it takes us about anywhere up to a year to post-produce it. The Man on the Moon, the satirical, fictional story of Stanley Kubrick faking the moon landings, has to be satirical so we don't end up getting sued by the Kubrick estate. Or Abducted, which is a quite a challenging film, but think British Taken, but with a Jason Statham style transporter character who has an exceptional set of skills that you only discover as he goes on his journey to recover his daughter, who has been kidnapped in a triple twist scenario. It's quite full on. And then the other one, my favourite, Ake. Can I spoil it? Can I spoil it? Someone's saying no, but I've got a nod over there. Seriously. Ake is a very inclusive film. I'll try not to spoil it. Ake is a very inclusive film, and it's religiously inclusive, and it is culturally inclusive. Now, this is clever filmmaking. I look at these things and I say, well, how do I sell my film to the maximum number of countries? So I've got a 4-man SAS team, and I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, I'm never going to sell that to the US. So I've got a 1-man SAS officer who is attached to a 3-man Delta Force team, because now I can sell it to America. And they're in Afghanistan. Well, I'm not going to be able to sell that to Muslim countries. That's going to be a real ask. But I've got a Pashtun hero in it who helps our worthy warrior to escape his foes. But it's not all as it seems, and the twist in the end of this is worthy of a real Hitchcockian film. And so I'm not giving it away. And it's only in the last 6 seconds you see the reveal. But because it's anti-evil but pro-inclusion, I've got pre-sales across most of the Muslim countries. And as a result, it should sell better than pretty much anything else in that space. How many Afghan? Sorry, Ake. Ake, which is it's Pashto for the old man. It's the English pronunciation of the Pashto for the old man. And it's a really interesting story. I mean, the guy who plays the old man doesn't speak, can't speak. He's got a mutilated tongue from a war injury. So you have to watch carefully, and it's what's not spoken. If you watch the film we referred to earlier, Capsule, you watch Capsule, so you'll remember this. Yeah, so Capsule, 1959 Cold War space thriller, a fictional first British mission into space, embedded in deep and real history, intentionally. In 1959, we had a rocket program called the Black Knight. And the Black Knight used to fire these rockets that were intercontinental ballistic missiles designed to send nukes over to other countries. It had a 58-inch circumference, which was big enough to get a small manned capsule onto it. In December 59, by recollection, it was number 7 that went missing out of the sequence. So 1 to 6 had been test launched, and then the balance up to, I think, 14, maybe 13 or 14 had been fired, but 7 was missing. So we wrote our story on the basis that that was actually sending a first manned mission into space. And it's a British mission. It's fictional, but it's based in real events. So our man was an ex-fighter pilot, test pilot. He'd flown in Operation Jiu-Jitsu in 1954. If you know your history, you'll know that in 1954, we flew combat and reconnaissance missions for the Americans using American aircraft over Russia. We were told to do it because we had a special relationship with the Russians that you probably have no idea about. You know all those MiGs that were flown in places like Korea, et al., all of those MiGs with the big open mouth engine bay at the front? They were equipped with Rolls-Royce engines. Our special relationship with the Russians in the Eastern Bloc, we sold them engines for their combat aircraft in the 50s. So the Americans didn't altogether trust us at the time. So we were asked to fly these missions because if our guys got shot down, the Russians would probably let them go, amongst other things. So he flew on Operation Jiu-Jitsu, so he had a background in that intelligence space and everything else. But he's in a capsule that is typically Heath Robinson and very much like technology of the time. Here, think minis. Imagine trying to send a mini on a rocket into space. That quality of British engineering and technology. So it doesn't all go to plan. A lot of it starts failing. But it starts failing deliberately because it's been partially, I won't give too much away. There's a triple reveal at the end of this particular film in a 7.5 minute single take shot that starts on a crane outside a building and ends up on the first floor, having gone through revolving doors, same take all the way through, up a set of stairs using a special rig we built, over a reception desk, into an office, into a dark room. We pulled, for those of you who know your photography, we pulled 2 stops of light from being outside in broad daylight, that means adjusting the iris, from outside in broad daylight to being inside in a dark projection room at the end where there was a film clip being shown from film recovered from the spacecraft, where the reveal is done. But the clues are throughout the film. There are anagrams, there are colour clues, there are wonderful little nuances buried all around the capsule. Photographs. There's a pub referenced in one of the photographs called The Wheat Sheaf and the Sickle that burns when there's a minor explosion. And it burns the word wheat sheaf off, leaving the word sickle. I'll let you work out how it happens, but it's all in there. Anagrams.
So this is your film Capsule?
That was Capsule. That was Capsule. So we like films with twists.
So I don't know if it's all been what you've been expecting, but I think we've had a whirlwind tour through, sorry, I forgot my microphone. We've had a whirlwind tour through technology, investing, military, we've gone into film, and a lot of lessons for business and entrepreneurship. So I would just like to say a big, big thank you to Paul, 'cause it's been fascinating. So thanks so much. A little something from us at Startup. Graham, we've got you the tartan bag. So, yeah, there you go. I think I'm on the train. But I just want to thank everyone very much for coming tonight. I want to give a thank you to our sponsors. So to Scintilla IP, get a qualified patent attorney. That's our advice. We've got ESS Startup. We've got you in here tonight. We're working with startups and SMEs and building out their teams. And we've also got Scott Moncrief and 4 Bytes as well, and very kindly support us to run these events. This is hence the Christmas badges that you've all got. We don't do a December event usually, so this is our last event for 2017. I'm going to be in touch with you all soon, updating you on the programme for 2018, which we're starting to build out already, which is looking really exciting. But just a big thank you again to Paul. It's been fascinating, so thank you so much. And are you staying around for a drink?
Yeah.
There's 4 drinks. If people want to stick around for a bit, please do, and thanks again for coming.